I will say hello to everybody. How is everybody today? It's a gorgeous Thursday. I don't know about you. You can see out my window. It is bright and shiny here. And it is a great day because it's very, very hot. It's a great day to sit inside in air conditioning and talk to people, which is what we're going to do. We have Coding Nomads co-founder Kim Desmond. She is going to be talking with Megan Boyce, who is a Coding Nomads former student, learned her stuff here, and then went off and made us all proud by getting a really, really good job using all of the skills that she learned here. So I'm going to turn this over to Kim, let her talk to Megan. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat. I have the chat open here. Happy to take your questions. We'll throw them in at opportune times. And until then, I'm going to hand it over to Kim. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Welcome, everyone. Thanks, you guys, for joining. Big thanks to Megan for joining and sharing some of her experience with us. So just to give a little bit more background on Megan, Megan attended our Java coding bootcamp back in 2017. So kind of an early adopter. That was our first year of business. And we had a coding bootcamp in Playa del Carmen. So it was back in our travel days of yore. And we had a really fun time. And after graduating, Megan got a job as a test automation engineer. And then she was promoted to a Java engineer. And that's still what she's doing today. And then also we call Megan a boomerang student because she is now also a mentor with Coding Nomads. So I'm not sure when it was that you got back in touch with us, but just said, I'm interested in helping out and kind of giving back and, providing for the community that helped me. And so now she's also a mentor with Coding Nomads, which we really love. And so today we're just going to ask Megan some questions about her journey. I know that some of you are probably in varying steps of your journey, whether you're just starting out or maybe in the middle or thinking about how to get that first job. So we can kind of talk to Megan about all of that. And we welcome your questions. As John mentioned, you can put them down in the comment box and then we'll either get to them as we go, or we can save them for the end, whichever works best. So Megan, just to get us started, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you started learning to code. Like, what was your kind of education background? What kind of job were you working in?
Yeah, sure. So, before coding, I went to school and graduated with a bachelor's in, it's called environmental design, policy, and planning, which is like a huge mouthful for just like sustainable urban planning, I think is a more concise way of saying it, which is just something like near and dear to my heart. I'm really interested in sustainability and the environment and taking care of it and all that stuff. And after that, I ended up landing a job at a nonprofit that focused on affordable housing, and that was in Montana. And they were doing like a Habitat for Humanity style program where they were building energy efficient houses, like super insulated. They put solar panels on them. They had all sorts of neat features to make them really energy efficient and affordable for the people to live in them. So that's what attracted me to this place originally. So I ended up going there. I was kind of like a jack of all trades. I was mostly like an office manager, marketer, outreach person, but I did all sorts of things because it was a really tiny office. So I was writing grants and answering the phones and basically whatever needed to be done, sometimes painting walls in houses. So it was really fun. It was really rewarding, but it was also not exactly what I wanted to be spending my time doing. I was a little bored, to be honest. Like I just wasn't really being challenged in the ways that I wanted to be. So I ended up doing that for about 4 years before coming to the boot camp.
Okay. So not being challenged. I mean, I remember when you applied, actually, you said, I like math and I've been taking math classes in my free time. So it sounds like maybe you wanted to do something more challenging, more technical, like, kind of what was the light bulb that went off one day when you just said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. Like, what made you bite the bullet? and decide
Yeah.
to start learning coding?
That's a good question. I knew a few people that were already programmers. They'd gone the computer science degree route, and they were just successful and loving it and happy. So, in talking with them, I was thinking like, maybe I should look into this for myself. Like considering I knew I had this like sort of logical mind. um, and then I was also at that job I was just mentioning, having to do a little tiny bit of website work. Like we had, forget the name of the host, but we had a website that where basically it was built for us. And every once in a while we would have to like tweak content and things. And I found myself really happy spending hours just tweaking little tiny things on this website for the nonprofit. And like doing that versus other things I should have been doing, and realizing like, oh, actually, I kind of enjoy this like tedium, and I think I might actually really like to code. So then I just started researching boot camps, because I knew I didn't want to go back to college and like do another degree the traditional way. And again, just talking to other people I knew who had done the same thing. And then once you start saying this is what you want to do, people kind of come out of the woodwork that you didn't know, or like refer you to people who did it too. And they all generally had really good experiences doing boot camps specifically.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think that combination of just having like wanting those kind of more technically challenging tasks, and then that little insight into that web development stuff, which I actually don't even do now, but I knew like there was something in line with what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So why did you end up choosing Coding Nomads? Like what made you kind of gravitate towards Java? You said you were doing web dev before, but then you decided to go back end.
Yeah. Well, the more I researched coding in general, the more I thought I would be more interested in back-end stuff, really having no idea what I was actually going to enjoy, but just from reading things. And I tried out a few. I bought like a book in Python and tried to just like teach myself a little bit of that, and really enjoyed it. But I just kept being drawn to the back end stuff. And the more I researched, like, okay, what should you learn if you're interested in the back end? Java came up a lot. So I just kind of said like, okay, that sounds like a good route to go with. Let's see what's out there that offers Java. Happened to find Coding Nomads along with a few other schools out there at the time. But I definitely felt drawn to Coding Nomads in particular over these others. Even though it was really new at the time, there was just like a personal focus that a lot of these other schools that I was looking at didn't have, where, you know, like you sign up for some information on their website and you get like a canned response, and then that's it. That was my experience with even a local school that was like in the same town I was living in. Just didn't have the same kind of personal touch. You know, and to be perfectly honest, I saw the courses were held in Mexico. I was like, yeah, that sounds fantastic too. But yeah, but then really talking to you and Ryan like won me over in the end, just having that personal connection and the specific questions you were asking me about like what I'm interested in, what do I do? And then having an immediate response from you guys to say like, oh yeah, you could totally do this, also like gave me the confidence boost that I needed to then just dive into it, that I didn't get from other places.
Interesting. Well, good. That's good to hear. I'm glad that, I mean, we started this as a family business, and it's still family run by me and Ryan. And yeah, the personal aspect and the community aspect is one of our favorite parts of it too. So I'm glad that vibed with you, because it vibes with us too. So let's talk about, at the boot camp and your learning journey. I think at that point we were having you guys do a little bit of Java study before the boot camp to kind of get a little bit of the fundamentals, but basically, most people were starting from scratch. So can you talk about, the learning journey and like the hard things or the successes? Like what was that like for you? Because I know that a lot of people here are in the thick of it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely went in with basically no knowledge whatsoever. So it was a lot. I will say that it's really, really intense, but at the same time, like every single day, I could see myself knowing more than I did the day before, still feeling completely lost most of the time, but there would always be these little pieces that started to connect day by day as I just like kept at it. I think it was helpful to have that condensed learning period, because I think even though it is a lot at once, I think it's really effective, because it's like you're just practicing every single day and learning and building on top of what you already know. And it is the kind of thing where the more you do it, the more it becomes second nature. And the things that you didn't know a week ago, you suddenly just do and know. So that was kind of surprising to me, to have those moments where I like remember not that long ago at all, not knowing how to write a for loop, and then suddenly I'm like just doing it really quickly, and it's almost natural at a certain point. So yeah, I'd say like in the process there, like just keep with it, because it does start to come together. And I do remember Ryan often saying like we layer these things on purpose, and like I do think that is a super effective way of teaching, and that you do kind of have to go back once in a while and be like, wait, what was that second layer we put in there? Because I've forgotten it now that we're on layer 5. But just building on it little bits at a time is like super effective. And I think like my biggest takeaway was to just kind of like trust that you are learning these things, even though you may not feel like you know it really, really well. That's okay. You definitely don't at first, but it does come with time. And it was really cool to see that progression in myself.
Yeah, I know that's really helpful to hear, because it's hard to learn to code, when you're learning all these new things that you've never heard of, and you're supposed to put them, together day by day and looping things together. And sometimes, like you said, you don't understand step 2, but you're supposed to be on step 5. And how, like, do you have any advice for people who are kind of in that process now, that might be getting frustrated or demotivated, or think, maybe this isn't for me, or can I actually do this, or can I actually do this day to day? Like, is there any, how do you stay motivated when it seems really overwhelming?
Yeah, it is. It's rough. I'd say, like, don't forget you're not the only one. Like, there's a community of people that you can easily reach out to for help, or just like moral support. Because a lot of us in the Slack channels and stuff have either done this already or are doing it at the same time. So there were lots of moments throughout the course where I definitely was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this for real. But having people around me who are also doing it and hearing them say the same exact thing, and then being able to sort of bounce off of each other, our frustrations and then our wins and stuff too, and recognizing those was really helpful. And I think helped me push through to the end, because there were definitely times where I wanted to give up. Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you didn't.
Me too.
All right. Well, so let's talk about the job search process. So, after the boot camp, you're working on your projects and reaching out to companies. Like, what was that like for you? Did you just you knew what location you wanted to be in, or how did you kind of go about searching for jobs?
Yeah, I didn't know where I was going to end up at the time. I was pretty open to anywhere. So I was casting a pretty wide net when I was applying. I was attempting to target companies I was personally interested in, that like tied back to the sustainability factor I was talking about earlier. That didn't actually pan out for my first job, but at the time, that's what I was trying to do. So I was, my approach was to try to make a connection with places, knowing that I didn't have work experience, and I would probably be pretty easy to pass over. I did think that like writing a strong cover letter and connecting with like a company's mission would have been my way in. And so, yeah, so for me, it was more about mission and purpose rather than location. I did use location a little bit to my advantage, though. I think that when I started targeting local companies to where I was much more successful. So take that for what it is. I don't know, but that's how it worked out for me.
Yeah, might be a little different now with, so much remote work and, and I know there's a lot of companies out there that do still prefer local people so that if and when things open back up, there could be that possibility, or maybe, a part-time in the office schedule, depending on, because some people want to go into the office. Some people would prefer to work from home. So I guess you can do both.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little different now, at least in the fact that there's a lot more remote opportunities out there than there were in 2017 when I was doing this. So that's a good thing if that's what you're looking for. But yeah, I do think like connecting on some level with any company is going to be a good way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah. So do you remember where you found your particular job? Like, were they posting a opportunity online? Did you see it on a job board, or did you just find their website? Like, how did you end up getting in contact with them and kind of getting your foot in the door?
Yeah, I do think so. I was using lots of different search engines, including Indeed and LinkedIn. But I think I found this company actually just by searching like local tech companies to where I was at the time, which was Bozeman, Montana. So I think I sort of randomly came across them, but I was also specifically targeting like Java engineer roles in the title, as opposed to like software engineer roles, which I also think was helpful because that narrowed it down a bit. I will say that since then, I have learned that LinkedIn is a huge resource.
Yeah.
I have had a ton of success since then using it. I don't think I was using it to the full advantage at the time. And in terms of like keeping my profile up to date and really like logging in frequently, and just anytime you sort of like log in and show that you've logged in recently, I think that bumps you up to the top of search lists and things. Because the longer I go without logging in, the less contacts I get over time.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think that is a really big resource right now that I would absolutely encourage people to leverage.
Yeah. I know that on LinkedIn, they have a, looking for jobs toggle or something. So you can toggle yourself as on, but obviously, you want to make sure that you have your profile updated. And, we always tell people, make it mirror your resume. And we actually, one of our previous students was an HR executive before she was a coding student, and now she's a software engineer. And so she actually gave us a lot of really good insight about saying, that they want to see your resume and your LinkedIn looking the same. Like if they're telling two different stories, it may seem redundant and it may seem kind of like, a little shortcut or cheating a little bit to just say, okay, well, it's the same thing on both. But she said that continuity is actually better, because then they really know what you're about. They really know what you're representing, and, making sure that that's all up to date, and then turning on that little toggle. And I mean, there's so many companies looking for engineers right now that if you have engineer in your title, even if you're not an engineer yet, but you have some projects under your belt, then you can say, junior developer, junior software engineer, junior Java developer in your title, and that'll really get you noticed a lot. And apparently logging in a lot too. Good to know.
Agreed. I still have my capstone project listed prominently on my LinkedIn profile, because my first job, I was not allowed to share my code. So I, for 4 years, had nothing to show. Like I was doing the work, but I couldn't actually share it with anyone. So
interesting.
That is still, really helpful to show.
Nice. Awesome. I think that was a blockchain kind of cryptocurrency project, right?
Yeah, sort of. I didn't actually use blockchain, but yes, I was trying to compile cryptocurrency data to predict prices, which did not work very well, but it was a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, that was back at the end of 2017 when we were having a big crypto boom.
Yes.
Followed by a bust and a crypto winter, but we were all really buzzing about it back then too, I remember.
Yeah, it was a topic of conversations many days.
Yes, for the better or the worse. So when you reached out to that company, you said making a personal connection was really helpful. What else was helpful, do you think, in let's talk about the interview process and, the follow-ups, like how did you go from that first connection to actually getting the job? Because I know that is something on the top of everyone's mind. How did the technical interview go? How did you prepare for that? Was it as terrible as everyone says that it's going to be? How did that go?
Yeah. I hate them. So they've all been terrible for me. The technical part anyway. But to kind of backtrack a little bit, as far as like preparing for that, I just did a lot of practicing. Like that is, I think, the only thing you can do, because you don't know what you're going to be asked on the day most of the time. I have had some take-home projects, which I personally prefer, but if it is like a day of in-person coding example, then you won't necessarily know in advance. And so the only thing you can do is just use all of the resources that are out there. There's so many free places to find little technical problems. Like we have some in the and then you go to places like LeetCode. There's hundreds of examples out there to work through. I think that's really all you can do, is just keep working through examples on your own time. Because then when the day comes and you get some question, and it might not be one you've already practiced, but it kind of gives you that confidence to go, okay, I've solved all these others. I can figure this one out, and at least work through it. And maybe I don't solve it in person, but that's okay. I show that I know the process. Mm-hmm. I think that's something to keep in mind when you're doing these things. And then I, over time, have become more aware of is like, I sometimes tend to like tense up the minute I get a question. I don't like people watching me work at all. So it's really difficult to do these technical interviews, but I have to just kind of like take a deep breath, take a step back and go like, okay, let's pretend they're not staring at me right now. How would I actually do this? And just work through it on my own time and not try to rush. And so, so to prepare, I just kind of did practicing on my own. And then when the day came, it actually wasn't even super technical. Like they wanted to hear more about my experience learning. I think maybe because at the time it was my first role, and that, they didn't really expect me to jump in and be productive on day one. So I think they were more curious about my background and like the process to get where I was, which was interesting. I did have other more technical interviews at other companies where they didn't want to know anything about my background. It was just like, here's a question, go solve it. So yeah, I don't know. It was a mixed bag of interview experiences, I will say. Like some much more challenging than others.
Yeah, I wanted to add the thing about you not wanting to have people see you work. As someone who's interviewed people for different jobs, I understand that reticence. However, from the point of view of me as an interviewer, that is exactly what I want to see. I really don't expect or care if you get the right answer. I want to see your thought process. I want to see what you go through, how you work on the problem. Because that to me is more telling than whether or not you can give me the right answer. I Google or Stack Exchange can give me the right answer, or Stack Overflow rather, can give me the right answer. Eventually, I want to know how persistent you are, what you're thinking, what you're going to go through in order to get to this answer. I know, did you, a personal pet peeve of mine, just an answer, a question, did you have any interviews where they made you write out code on the whiteboard? Because I hate that.
I actually have never had to do that.
Oh, surprising.
I
That's
know.
good. That's good
Bless you.
because
Yeah.
everyone says you're never going to have to do that when you're working on the job. You never whiteboard your code, but
Yeah.
it's just like an evil thing that they make you do sometimes in interviews.
Yeah.
So that's good that you didn't.
It's horrible to have to do that. I'm glad that you did not have to do that. So
Yeah,
okay.
so far. But yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate that input. And I think that has been important for me to remember during these interviews because they make me so nervous. I have to remember, like, they just want to see how I work, not necessarily that I get the right answer in some X amount of time.
Yeah, something that we tell people all the time is skills can be learned, but attitude is inherent. So if you don't know the answer, what do? Do you get really angry and you give up and say, I just don't know. I don't know. I've never seen this before. I can't do this. Or do you ask questions and try to work the problem and just try to get anywhere, just try to collaborate? And yeah, I think to John's point, people want to know whether or not they're going to enjoy working with you, because problems are going to get hard and you're not going to know how to do everything. Even the most senior engineers don't know how to do everything. That's why they're engineers. They figure stuff out, so that's a good point about, how do you work and what do you do under pressure? And I like what you said about pretending that they're not there, just trying to kind of compartmentalize maybe a little bit, because the nerves can kind of take over sometimes and maybe you won't even act the way that you normally would in a working scenario. So just trying to block that out and just act like, okay, this is just me in the code. What would I do? Take it step by step.
Yeah, exactly.
And also interesting to hear about the different companies and their different approaches. That is one of the challenges about technical interviews. You don't ever really know what kind of questions they're going to ask, but it sounds like the company that you ended up going with was maybe a little bit more aligned with where you are in your journey, because again, skills can be learned. And so they know, okay, she's in her learning process right now. So her mind is like a sponge and she's open and receptive to this. And so maybe we focus on that rather than what can you do right now in this moment, because that's just not even really practical. Like you're always going to be learning new things.
Yeah. I don't know what was going through their mind, but that sounds like a good good assessment.
Sounds like it was a good fit for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So you started out as a test automation engineer. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how?
Yeah, so that my first role was test automation, which was, if you're not familiar with that, it's like essentially you're writing code that runs the tests that your like quality assurance people would do manually otherwise. So in my case, it was actually like mimicking a user logging into a website, filling in like their username, password, and then doing whatever they would do in the program. So behind the scenes, I used a tool. It was called Test Complete, and I ran actually JavaScript in it, which I had absolutely no experience with going into that. So I think that's an important thing to point out too, is like, whatever language you're learning right now may not necessarily be the one you end up using in your role either. And that's okay. I mean, this, like Kim was saying, this company saw that I was a sponge. And so I think that's why they thought this would be a good role for me, even though I'd had no experience with any of these tools. So I worked really closely with the quality assurance people on the software team, but also with the developers. There was a process where like the developers would write code, they'd write a new feature, hand it over to QA. QA would do like some manual testing, and then it would be my turn to go through and say, okay, what can I automate out of this testing process here? Because not everything lends itself well to automated testing, but a good amount of it does. So the idea was to take away as much manual process as possible.
So you interviewed for a Java developer position, and you
I
got
did.
offered a testing automation position, which you said you had no experience in. And I think that that's an interesting point. That actually happens with a lot of our students, that they interview for one role and then they get another role that they might not even have any experience in. And it just kind of goes to show that employers realize that if you have some skills, especially if you're in that learning mode where you're eager to learn and you're motivated to learn, I think that there's an understanding that you don't have to know all the answers, you don't have to have experience in it, but you just have the aptitude to do it. So that's interesting that they, kind of trusted you to figure it out. And, you had enough skills in Java that they thought, well, she can definitely do this. And I remember actually you saying that, you were going for a Java position and maybe you were, maybe a little kind of surprised or maybe a little disappointed that you ended up in the other role. But then I remember a couple months later you saying, actually, this is kind of a great first position because just a little bit less stress, a little bit less pressure. Maybe you can comment on that if you have any thoughts on kind of just getting your foot in the door in any position that you can, and maybe your transition into the Java developer position afterwards.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I did originally interview for a Java developer role. And there was about like a 2-week period where I didn't hear a response after that first interview. And I just kept following up every week on schedule, like, hey, still here, still interested. Do you have any updates? Like that sort of thing. I'd change it up each week, but I think I went like almost 6 weeks of that.
Wow. Persistence.
Yeah, so I think that helped too. And then at some point in that time period, I did get a new message from them that said, hey, we're not going to go forward with this Java role, but what about this other role? And then we had one more interview for that. So I think my persistence there was definitely helpful to keep me in the top of their minds as they were hiring. It's not even a role that I remember seeing listed at the time when I applied. Yeah, so I think it's important to kind of keep connected to places that you are interested in, because you never know what they're actually looking for in the background or what might come up in the future. So that helped. And I forgot the second part of your question.
About transitioning into the Java developer role.
Yes. So, and I will say, like, because I had originally interviewed for the Java role, that there was, like an implied agreement that start here, we'll see how it goes. If things go well over time, we'll move you into the Java role. So that was the understanding when I started, and that's basically exactly what happened. And I think one thing that helped that process was to continually communicate that to my manager, that like, yep, I'm doing this, I'm doing well, like here are the things I'm doing and accomplishing, and to always remind him of my ultimate goal of moving to the Java side. And I think just like to your point, that role did probably work out better for me in the long run because it was a less stressful role. I was never.
You mean the testing automation where you started?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because my code never went to production, so there wasn't any risk of like breaking things. If my stuff broke, the testing process was broken, not the actual product. So that took some pressure off of me, which was nice. And I kind of see now why they put me there first too, to kind of protect them as well. But yeah, just like, doing your best at whatever it is you're put into. And then if there is some other goal that you're trying to achieve, to just like communicate that with your supervisor, and to keep reminding them if they sometimes forget that that's what you actually want to be doing. I think that worked well for me.
Yeah, persistence again prevails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, took a little longer than I would have liked, but it did work out.
Yeah. And so now you're full-blown Java engineer. I believe you've also switched companies.
Yep.
And so what's your day-to-day like? Like, is it a lot of the stuff that you learned at Coding Nomads? Did you have to learn more stuff? Is it, what kind of technologies are you working with now?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited now to be working with Spring again. So the first job I got, which I was in for the last 4 years, didn't use Spring much at all. There was, I think, a tiny little bit of it in there, but that was a big piece of the Java course. So I am now able to work with that again, which is pretty exciting. I am like a bit worried that I've forgotten all of it in the last 4 years, but I now have the opportunity to relearn that stuff and to get it back into my brain. So
we have a really good Spring course
yeah,
that works. So you can always refer back to that.
It's helpful. So I mostly work with Java. That's exclusively what I worked with at my last company, but I did recently move to a different company, which is in line with my sustainability goals and stuff. So that's cool. But they have me mostly on Java stuff right now, but there's also a bit of Python in there, a bit of React, and I'm not even sure what else because it's only been 2 months since I started.
Oh, nice. So well, congrats on the new job.
Finding out new things. Thank you.
So how's that process of learning on the job, learning, like picking up Python or looking into React? How does that feel for you?
Yeah, it's pretty fun, honestly.
Nice.
It's challenging for sure because I don't know Python now, and I've been asked to like look at this script and figure out what's wrong with it. And so there's a lot of Googling things and reading up on things to figure out what it all means. But I'm much more comfortable now with like realizing that that's the process. Like no one expects me to know exactly what this is doing immediately, even with a couple of years experience now. So it's a lot of learning on my own and then talking to my coworkers who do know more Python than I do to get insight from them. Just a lot of like collaboration and trial and error and figuring it out, which I really enjoy. So it's been a lot of fun the last couple of weeks doing that.
Nice. Is there anything that you've done in your work experience that is just like, man, that was so cool? Like that just is kind of like a bow on top. Like what's the coolest thing that you have done or achieved, or kind of your favorite breakthrough moment or something?
Yeah. Wow. That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Like that honestly happens quite often. And sometimes it's really little dumb things that aren't very exciting to anyone else.
Well, you're in good company here.
Yeah. I still think that my capstone project is one of the coolest things I've done. Like for a really long time, I worked in the financial services field, and everything I worked on felt so boring. So it's funny that nothing is actually popping into my head as like, oh yeah, that was really cool. Was it? I do think now though, at the new company, they have this like really neat program that is working with utilities. And so I'm getting to work on like this API that communicates with customers' thermostats, like a Nest thermostat, to like actually adjust their settings if there's like a heat wave or something and everyone's got their air conditioners going. So I'm just really excited to be like working in that at all, even though if I haven't done anything super cool with it yet.
Yeah, just to be in that industry that you're.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. And it took a couple of years, but you kind of had that goal in mind, and now you've achieved it, which is really awesome.
Yeah, it feels pretty good.
That is really cool. Yeah, something that's just so cool about engineering is that you really can use it in so many different industries. You really can kind of marry your interests with your technical skills, because basically any kind of company needs engineering skills. So good for you for kind of sticking to your passion and not giving up on your dream. You had to do a few years of boring financial work to get there, but it helped you build the skills that you needed to get that job ultimately. So it all seems like it went towards the goal.
It did, yeah, yeah. And I second that. Like whatever you're interested in, you can find an engineering role in that field in some capacity.
Nice. Um, so let's see. How about talking about being a Java mentor now? What's that like? What do you like about that? Or, what are some of the challenges even?
Yeah, it's fun. I am just loving seeing people go through the same process that I did. And, it wasn't that long ago that I did it. So I think it's still fresh in my mind, like what it was like, and
Mhm.
to just understand what they're going through. Um, but it is so rewarding to work with people and to just see them go from knowing absolutely nothing about coding to being able to write their own program. I understand why you started this company because it is like it's a life-changing thing to get into this field that is so personally rewarding but also like lucrative. You can really be financially successful in this field, whereas that's challenging in many, many others.
Mhm.
So like that is a big piece of it for me too, to know that like this can be really life-changing on like multiple levels to become a developer. So it's just super, super rewarding to be doing this now.
Nice. Well, we love it. I mean, community is one of the biggest aspects of Coding Nomads. I know we started as, a travel program, so we would form these friendships and, really get to know each other really well. And it's a little different now doing things online, but it's awesome that we still have that aspect sometimes. Actually, randomly, little story, we're in Portland right now, and one of our data science students got in touch with us and said, "Hey, I'm in Portland. I play with a band and I've got a gig." And this was last night. And the night before, we had just gotten back from traveling to visit my family on the East Coast. So we had this huge travel day, lots of layovers, and we were pretty exhausted. But Ryan said, "Hey, Samuel's in town and he's playing a show. It's about 45 minutes away." We said, "All right, let's do it." So we went and he's playing on stage. We'd never met in person. We've only had an online relationship. And he was in the middle of a set. And so we just started dancing. People were two-stepping. It was country music. And then when he finished his set, he got off stage and we all hugged and had a drink and hung out for a few hours. And we just thought, this is so cool, that we're still, we still have that feeling where we're friends, like yes, we are teaching and you guys are learning really technical stuff and it's can be stressful and hard sometimes, but having that community aspect where you can feel comfortable reaching out about anything and sharing these moments that have nothing to do with coding. We did talk shop a little bit. We kept saying not to talk too much shop, not to talk too much shop, and then we just continue talking shop, but we all enjoy it. It's not just something that we're doing for work, but it's also something that we do for that rewarding aspect and community. And so we can still make those connections online. And I know that you've got nice relationships with your students that you've met online, and so it's just nice to kind of keep that going. And we love our boomerang students that come back and giving back. We really appreciate that, and I know that your perspective is really powerful. I mean, we can tell people all day, oh, you can do this, you can make it happen, but coming from you, it's a lot more real because you did make it happen. You did start from scratch and you did come in as a total beginner, and then 6 months later you're in the industry, and now a couple years later you've worked your way up and you're working in your dream industry. And so it's just really powerful to hear that from you, that it can be done, it has been done. So thank you for coming back and continuing to add to the community. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, we're kind of wrapping up on our questions. I have just one or two more, and then we can go to, I see Vilma has her hand raised, and we've got a couple questions in the chat. But I guess the last kind of things are, and we've already talked about this a little bit throughout, but, what's the biggest piece of advice that you could give to someone who is starting the journey that you started a couple years ago?
I would say to give it the time it deserves. Like I would try to avoid, like starting, stopping kind of thing. I think that, you don't necessarily have to dive, like I did a full-time thing. I don't think you necessarily have to do that, but I do think that just every day, every other day, like keeping at it over time is the way to go, hands down.
Yeah, last night when we were chatting with Samuel, when we were saying goodbye, he said, "Okay, well, I'm doing some shows right now. I'm on the road, so I'm not going to have a ton of time to do coding." He was kind of, giving a little excuse, and Ryan said, "It's a drum beat. As long as the drum keeps beating, even if it's a slow beat sometimes, but just, don't let it be a week or two before you check in, because if you wait a week, even then when you're catching up, you're kind of going back to, okay, what was it? I had that light bulb moment 2 weeks ago, but now, like, what was that? And, so even if it's a slower pace, and even if you draw it out over a long period of time, just keep that drum beating and keep it consistent, keep it every single week. So, and, a lot of people, there's a lot of boot camps out there that say you can change your entire life and go work for Google in 12 weeks or something like that. Like, there's a lot of huge promises that get thrown out, and we've always kind of bucked that a little bit. We've just tried to be real with people, because honestly, I mean, sure, if you're working your butt off for 3 months, you're going to get somewhere, but even still, just that practice and that, the coding practice and building those projects, and that repetitive, like Meghan, you were saying, at first doing a for loop was really difficult, but then all of a sudden, after doing it over and over and over, all of a sudden it just kind of becomes easier. But that just comes with time. And even if you're working 80 hours a week on something, it's not necessarily going to get you there that much faster. Your projects aren't going to be as deep as they will over months. And so I think that that's a really good anecdote to give it the time that it deserves, and just have that persistence and consistency. Is there anything that you would do differently if you could do it all over again?
That's a good question. I'd probably prep more in advance.
We require a lot more prep work now, actually.
Yeah.
Now we actually, we haven't done an in-person course in a while, but we got to the point where we were basically having people completely learn Java before even coming to the boot camp, so that we could just try to get right into spring and the advanced stuff. So
yeah,
that was also, our inexperience of realizing this is a harder, that, it takes time. It just takes time. So doing more prep work is a good point.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with like a regret really other than that, because I wouldn't do anything differently. I would do it again if given a chance.
Maybe not regrets as much as, a process that
right.
But you already said that you probably just would have studied more beforehand. So just more time, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, John Sessions mentions start sooner is what he would bring up there, and I agree. It's something I think about. Is one thing I would do differently is do this maybe 10 years ago. And it's never too late to start, though.
Yep. It's just start as soon as possible, and by being here in this meeting, everyone's, you're exposing yourself to it, and hearing about the experience like that is, that's part of starting. It's just being involved, being proactive. So I would like to just kind of go through, I'm just going through the chat a little bit. Just making sure we've got all the questions answered. Frank asked, is whiteboarding writing your code in a Google Doc? Just to clarify, whiteboarding it's literally a whiteboard, like a dry erase board that you write with, those dry erase markers, then you can erase it. It's like a new school chalkboard, I guess. It replaced chalkboards, but it's common in technical interviews to have people write their code on an actual board on the wall. So instead of writing it in your IDE or on your computer, it's physically on a whiteboard, which gets a lot of flack because when you're actually doing coding projects, you're not writing it on a whiteboard, you're writing it on your computer. And so, but that's, again, just another way for the interviewers to see, how does this person work under pressure? How does this person think on their toes? How does this person work the problem? Are they willing to work the problem? Are they willing to get up in front of people under pressure and in a nervous situation and write on the whiteboard? So that's kind of what whiteboarding is, just coding practice on a physical board.
Yeah, and aside from the hassle of whiteboarding during an interview, I have found it to be a really helpful tool just to kind of put your thoughts in a different format when you're tackling certain problems and you're stuck. So it can come in handy, as annoying as it also can be at times.
Yeah, definitely. And then Stephen shared a resource for what is whiteboard coding. So thank you, Stephen. Kyle asked, do you feel that having a degree, even in an unrelated field, gave you an advantage in getting a job versus someone with no degree? I ask many people on YouTube when explaining their journey on being self-taught, and all appear to have a degree in something prior to the coding interview. Any thoughts on that, Megan?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to speak to that, but it probably helps. I don't think it necessarily means anything in reality. Like, I don't think that having that degree has helped me be a programmer in any way. But I think the reality of it is probably checking that box on a resume is going to give you a leg up versus other people when it comes to like HR and hiring. But as I said, like in terms of actually learning to code, no, didn't help me at all in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that, we're based in the United States, and in the United States, there is this kind of unfortunate bias towards people that have degrees. And again, it's just a box. I mean, a lot of people get degrees in things that they don't end up using, random things that they were interested in when they were 18 years old. And, the reality is that people change their interests. But we do have some students, actually one who was on this call, I don't know if he's still around, but he actually didn't even really get his high school. I mean, he got a GED. So he kind of dropped out of high school, got his GED. So he had the diploma, but then didn't do any college because the university just wasn't for him. And it's not for a lot of people. I mean, it's expensive and it's more theoretical, not that practical. My partner Ryan, who leads the curriculum development at Coding Nomads, did get a computer science degree. And he had no idea what he was doing at his first job. No idea. He would pull all-nighters and just try to figure stuff out, trying to get any progress that he could make at all. And he just thought, this is crazy. I just spent all this money and all this time getting my degree that didn't really help me at all. It did check that box, but that's why he built the curriculum to be what he actually did on the job rather than what he did in university. So, we've seen both sides of it. And I know that a lot of companies now are publicly saying that they don't ask if people have degrees anymore. I think Google and maybe even Apple, some of the big FANG companies who you would think would care a lot about that. But it's gotten to the point, especially with engineering, that they just need engineers. They just need people who can do the work. And so if you can demonstrate that you can do the work, then you can get a job. Absolutely. And we've seen students do it who don't have college degrees. And so it's just about finding those companies that are putting more emphasis in your skills rather than how much money you spent on school, because it just levels the playing field a lot. And really, at the end of the day, they just need people who can do the work. So, if you don't have a college degree, you don't need to let that hold you back or be a blocker or demotivate you in any way, because, it just means that you need to have really great projects and just keep building projects and just keep demonstrating that you can do the work. And the companies, you will find a spot, you will find a company. Let's see, I'm just going through the questions. Does Coding Nomads have programs on API design in Python and systems design? This is from Vilma. Oh, and then Jared actually answered, we offer a course that introduces API access, but we do not dive into design patterns at this time. But thank you for the suggestion. You know, we're constantly working on our courses, as you all probably know. We're constantly building new courses, constantly improving our existing courses. We love getting feedback from students on either, you know, bugs that they find in the courses or things that could be improved, or, you know, videos that could be improved, you know, any kind of improvement. So this is something that we'll take into consideration. You know, we're always looking at what can we do next, you know, what do people want? So thank you, Vilma, for that question and suggestion. Yeah, John Sessions said start sooner. That would be his advice. John is one of our former students and who's a badass engineer now. Hi, John. Jay says, thanks, Megan, for the chat. You sound like you really enjoyed your capstone project. Have you been able to work on any side coding projects since?
I have not, actually. I have found that since I started working, I don't want to spend my free time writing more code.
But you do spend time mentoring students. So.
I do, yeah. Maybe that's my side project. But no, I haven't written any other like fun projects just for myself since then, actually. I know some people do, but yeah, that hasn't been my style.
Well, you get your fill at work, I guess.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of our mentors are engineers. You know, all of our mentors are part-time and they do engineering jobs because we like for people to be real engineers so that, you know, it's not just academia here. I mean, we have a little bit of mix of both academics and engineers. But they always say that mentoring is like a breath of fresh air because it's still coding, but it's so much easier. They just say that the things that I'm working on with students is just, it's rewarding and it is challenging still, but that it's just, you know, it's not the kind of like beat the head on the desk kind of stuff that you work on it during the day job. So it's still, you know, technical, but not as challenging or hardcore, I guess. So that's nice that you know, still give some of your free time to side projects like that.
Yeah, it's not as stressful, I'll say that much. It's more fun.
Good. And then Edward has a question. Is it a bad thing to know what you want in life in terms of profession?
I say absolutely not. I think it's a great thing to know what you want in life, and to, you know, if you have a goal in mind for yourself, you can just always be working towards it. That way, you know, if you don't know what you want, that's okay too, but I don't think it's a problem at all to know what you want.
Yeah, I agree. You know, just like with Meghan, she was interested in environmentalism and sustainability. And so she had that as her goal. And it took a few years to get there with the coding, but now you're working in something that you feel really good about. But you know, it can go both ways. I mean, there's some people who just, they're not sure, and that's okay too. You know, the nice thing about coding is there's lots of jobs out there, you know, and we have some students who come and say, this is what I want to do. I'm going for this. But honestly, most of our students don't have that. They just say, I just want to code and I don't really know what I want to do yet, but I just want to get into the industry because I know that there's lots of opportunity and, you know, financial opportunity, job opportunities. Like you're never going to have a hard time getting a job. I mean, it's difficult to get that first job, but you know, there's just lots of opportunities. So I agree with Meghan that either way is okay. You know, if you're not quite sure or you know exactly what you want to do. So John Sessions just asked a question. Any thoughts on sustainably developing software? What responsibilities do engineers have to ensure, or what responsibilities do engineers have to ensure that aren't using unnecessary physical resources to manipulate data?
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah, I like it a lot. I do think it's something in my experience that which is limited, but I have not seen too many people that have that kind of a concern. At least from the cost side, there's always a concern, but not so much the output or the impact side. And I do think it's something that engineers should be thinking about more.
So I guess what I've been knocking around in my brain is these massive data centers that we have that take tremendous amount of electricity and water and all sorts of these physical resources. What responsibilities do we have to minimize how much space data takes, or how often we're reading and writing to these physical disks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess that answer is up to us, because in my experience, I haven't had an imposing limit put on me in any way, really, except.
But I think that's one concern I have, is that nobody's really thinking about those limits and how data centers are actually impacting our physical environment.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22. I saw some quote the other day that engineers think that they can solve everything with tech, but then there's the environmental aspect of it, like for example with blockchain, with Bitcoin mining and stuff like that. It's super energy intensive, and our energy needs are just getting higher and higher. So could be an interesting field, with efficiency in computing and data centers. All right, well, it is on the hour, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Does anyone have any more questions that they'd like to ask? All right, well, thank you so much, Meghan, for taking your time. As always, pleasure to chat with you and see you. And thank you everyone so much for taking the time to listen to Meghan's advice. And feel free to reach out anytime to us. If you have any other questions, we'll be editing this and posting it to YouTube in the next couple of days. So you can stay tuned for that if you want to go back for any of these awesome advice nuggets. But thank you so much, Meghan, for sharing your experience and for being part of the community. It's really awesome to run the whole gamut with you.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
You're welcome. Great. Well, we will see everyone soon at the next Tech Talk. Thanks again for joining, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you all so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please let us know by liking and subscribing. If there's another topic that you'd like to learn more about, leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you. And if you want to become a coding pro, visit our website at codingnomads.co. See you next time.